on the quality of our staff, because our ministry by definition is skills driven. We need to engage in a major human resource capacity development drive. Our ministry, under the visionary guidance of His Excellency the President, has even decided to set up an Academy of Financial Studies of world class, and I wish to seek the expertise and technical cooperation of the PIM, which has come up to this level so well to facilitate this process as a PPP. Of course, not the private-public partnership which everybody speaks. I mean a public-public partnership. I hope that this request will be treated very positively by PIM. The second category of officials who are in thirst for skills are from conflict-affected areas. There are 51 of them here. They lost access to quality life and hence professional development due to an obvious reason, that is the 26-year-old conflict. We are extremely grateful to the two provincial councils and the PIM for affording this opportunity to the 51 officers to address the acute shortage of knowledge through this type of program and positioning them to be able to successfully face post-conflict development challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, Sri Lanka is now not only a post-conflict country, it's a middle-income country. Our country has graduated to this level under most difficult conditions. As far as I know, no country has achieved a middle-income economy status in the midst of a prolonged conflict, while facing such other grave challenges as well. We should be proud to note that our country was able to manage those challenges. Today, our country is enjoying unique advantages that we could not even think of during the past several decades. One is that the conflict has ended, and hence risk and uncertainties faced in every sphere of life have disappeared. Second, the country has graduated to infrastructure development in modern ports, power generation, road network, irrigation and telecommunications, helping us to shift away from uncertainties associated with infrastructure support. All these achievements are due to sustained public investment of around 6% of GDP per annum over a 5-year period. I am sure Dr. Lloyd Fernando will admire this, as he is one of the few who believes, in my mind, in protecting public investments. I know personally, when I was a mid-career officer in the central bank, how he voiced his concerns in the 80s and 90s, when all multilateral agencies and government technocrats were moving in one direction to compress public investment to address fiscal adjustments. Third, the global economy, which suffered due to the collapse of global banking and financial institutions in the latter part of 2008, with the prediction of a major depression similar to that in the 1930s, none of us know that, has fortunately recovered with a marked shift in the global economic power base towards countries which were considered third world a few decades ago. Most of such emerging economies are in Asia, and we see a future in which at least 10 Asian countries, in my view, will be the world richest in one way or the other in the next 10 years. At least 5 of them will be the world's topmost economies, and at least 2 countries, namely India and China, will be the nations growing at 10% per annum and will be capable of changing the economic landscape of Asia. They will not be mere high per capita income economies, but will be nations driven by science and technology. So we are living in a promising regional economic environment, which is essential for us to achieve and maintain our planned economic growth in excess of 8%. Last but not least, our country has gained political stability, blessed with a charismatic and visionary leadership. In my view, economic development needs not only peace, investment, infrastructure, and favorable global condition, but also needs a visionary and caring leadership when the country reaches the stage of economic takeoff. All emerging economies have proved this hard political reality. These 4 requirements, that is peace, infrastructure, regional development, global regional development, and political stability, we have, together with those, with the resilience which our economy has demonstrated in the past 5 years, pushing us from $1,000 per capita income to $2,000 per capita income, provides us with a unique opportunity to take off, to become an emerging economy. The government has set the target of $4,000 per capita income, that is double the current per capita income, by 2016. This means Sri Lankan society need to work much harder than in the last 6 years. It is not mere hard work, but it required quality work. It does not permit us to waste time, resources, material, space, people and skills. The speed to reach the $4,000 per capita income target requires an accelerated process from 8% growth in GDP over the medium term to 6% growth thereafter, 10% growth thereafter, to sustain development. This is in fact double the speed in growth terms that we witnessed since 1977. It is also a speed that we have to achieve within a shorter span of time. So the demand is intense. Ladies and gentlemen, opportunities alone will not produce desired outcome of a higher and intense economic growth. When we speak of over 8% economic growth, we must also admit that God has gifted at least part of it to our country and want us to add a premium to it. In this country, rain at a regular interval facilitate generating a good growth in agriculture, industry, power generation, trade and banking. That is God-given, not man-made. If those managing the economy can build reservoirs, put in place good water management practices, extension services for agriculture, environmental conservation to sustain future rains, and knowledge-based management, then those economic sectors can add a premium to the God-given growth rate. If other investment can come into the picture, we can add even more to the premium. This is the responsibility of the government as well as the private sector. The public sector has a unique role to play. As His Excellency the President once said and captured in the roadmap for medium term in the 2010 budget, the public sector is the enabler of every stakeholder in the economy. We must enable everybody to perform, to add a premium to what our economy has. In this context, we in the public sector and government must ask ourselves whether we live up to this task. To be very frank, I have doubts. Doubts in our system of education and doubts in our civil administration. Both education and civil administration are, in my view, outlived in many aspects. They are neither colonial nor post-colonial modern day systems. First, let us talk about education. Learned Vice Chancellor, the problems are widespread in school and university admissions, providing classrooms and teaching material at all levels of education. Whether it is a primary level, school, replicate our own success stories such as Morotu University, Badulla University, or the Postgraduate Institute of Management, and reorient our entire universities to adopt a need-based approach. Why do we need to have parallel education through private tuition if our education is sound on the same scale as our formal education system now functions? What is the message that Dr. Udita Liyanage, Director Postgraduate Institute of Management, is giving when he mentioned to me in his letter of invitation that most of the participants had a hard time to absorb the teaching material and to communicate due to poor English language skills? My assessment is that while we have isolated success stories in our education to explain our achievements so far, we also need to admit widespread failures in our entire system of education, which is vital if we are to place our country on a premium growth path that I was speaking of. At a time when our children must compete with children in India, China, and many other emerging economies, 20 years ago was considered absolutely poor economies. We need our education system to be fully ready to prepare our children towards more sophistication. All growth models recognize the pivotal role that education plays in economic growth. So PIM is a model among few others that our experts need to consider seriously when looking at institutional reforms in higher education. I suggest Dr. Udita Liyanage to even consider an IPO to enable this reputed education center to be truly public. I made a similar suggestion to NIBM when I delivered its convocation address in 2008, of course at a time when I was not with the government, having been compelled to surrender my rights to serve in the public office. The need to come forward into the market is timely, as the story of PIM is remarkable and promising. Since the government has officially recognized that Sri Lanka must be developed as a knowledge-based economy, reforms and dynamic leadership in creative positioning of high learning institutions is unavoidable in our economy when we try to achieve high performing economic status. Let me also turn to another important area that I wish to touch upon in my address, that is administration in which you and I are engaged, and of course our chosen career. The government machinery is unique in modern economies and definitely in high performing economies. the division of labour in the government in the arms of executive, legislature and judiciary is meant to keep the relevant specializations and maintain checks and balances of each other, but are not meant to function in compartmentalized environments. These three arms, that is the judiciary, the legislature, parliament and the government, executive, must aim at supporting the common vision of the nation if we are to become an emerging economy. The legislators must legislate inter alia to facilitate economic development and to put in place a legislative framework necessary to be able to deliver development outcomes. The role of the judiciary is to act free from emotions and to be an adjudicator in conformity with applicable parameters in the legal framework. In the country's overall interest, all these arms should act with shared responsibility towards economic development. Have we got this right? To be able to speak of a well-functioning governance structure free from uncertainties to facilitate economic development? I am not sure. So, are we ready to compromise development further or have suboptimum economic performance that Dr. Lloyd Fernando referred to, or break this completely and remove this barrier? What is our choice? This is one area that has to be addressed through administrative reforms. Since economic growth cannot be sustained when there is uncertainty in the governance structure. Uncertainty is the worst enemy of high economic growth and is also a prime source of corruption. So if we need a premium growth over and above what God has gifted, we need to minimize uncertainty in our administrative system. Ladies and gentlemen, those who promote positive thinking, probably the management experts, prefer to describe a half-empty glass as half full. I have seen that this concept is used differently in different sectors. In the public sector, this approach is used to please everyone. So much so that the empty half is grossly forgotten and never filled. In the private sector, on the other hand, the half-full concept immediately draws the attention of the supervisors since it is treated as a mission that is not accomplished. And prompt measures are taken to remedy the situation. Action is taken to ensure that the bottom line is well managed in the interest of shareholders and the half-empty part is filled. We in the government need to adopt this attitude in management, as we cannot go on being complacent with half-full scenarios anymore. The next aspect I wish to draw upon is the institutional mechanism in government. Recently, the entire society demanded for a lower number of ministries, and His Excellency the President responded to this so boldly. He reduced the number of ministries and ministers and secretaries. So we have lesser number of ministries and secretaries. Is this enough? Unless we take these positive signals to the next level of government, the reduction of ministers would have no meaning. That is why we need to identify institutions which involve overlapping and causing duplication of work at a tremendous cost of public funds as part of reforms, and find alternative arrangements. We in the Ministry of Finance and Planning very often hair split and have found over 6 national level institutions responsible for rural based development. Equally, another 6 institutions responsible for the promotion of self-employment social security system, etc., duplicating the same again and again and again. Just to mention a few examples. In modern economies, consolidation are being done to gain efficiency and ensure accountability. Of course, in the Ministry of Finance and Planning, His Excellency the President on his own gave a leadership to consolidate 6 regional development banks into one strong bank, eliminating 6 different board of directors and consolidating the capital base of all 6 banks. So time has come to apply the sunset theory to all government agencies and examine their relevance in a modern day context. It is equally important that a similar theory is made applicable to laws in the country so that outlived laws would also be removed from statute books, thus facilitating, updating and modernizing laws to suit development needs. As I mentioned, the restriction even to remove or cut trees are emanating from such legislation. There are legislations in which Secretary of the Treasury is required to be official member in almost all the statutory agencies, which none of the secretaries in recent times have been able to fulfill because of the impracticability of such legislation. Evenly important in administrative reform is to make a serious assessment to verify at what cost the current delivery system functions and to compare it with benefits. There is no justification to engage in negative net worth activities in any country. I cannot understand why most of the leading ministries like education, health, agriculture, which are very critical ministries, are eager to manage logistics such as provisioning of textbooks, uniforms, furniture and equipment, medicine, etc., instead of concentrating on policy and development and human resource development, and take steps to put in place an alternative mechanism to manage logistical arrangements. Dr. Vikrama Virusuriya, Dr. Lloyd Fernando, both were at the peak when Sri Lankan economy was shifted from a tightly guarded economy to open economy. And at that time, many reforms were done. And I am now wondering whether the government decision made in 1977 to close down the Food Commissioners Department or the Government Supplies Department were right decisions, because those were logistic management department. Only thing was those departments were gifted by colonial masters to manage logistics. Why not such institutions be entrusted with specialized logistic management so that at least the important ministries such as education, health, agriculture would be liberated from such routine procurement and logistic management activities to enable them to focus on quality education, provision of health and agricultural development. It is more relevant now than before in the context of our desire to become a knowledge economy, to concentrate on education and health. Underlying reforms that I am suggesting do not involve closures, winding up, or retrenchment, but demand only reorganizations. Such reorganizations will also reduce operational cost and enable each employee to be involved in more effective work and render a greater service efficiently. Hence, we must realize that replacement of manual work by computer system alone is not administrative reforms. Learned Vice Chancellor, distinguished members of the Board of Management, distinguished invitees, Director of TIN and faculty members, let me condense my speech by drawing your attention, as well as the attention of all those who are present, to the fact that development will not take place simply because of the opportunity we have now. The opportunity we have can be like having a stage without a play. A good stage is always necessary to perform a good play, but that alone is not sufficient. We need to concentrate more on the play itself. A good story, a producer, a director, the cast, technicians, musicians, etc. must be ready. In our country, after battling a 26-year costly conflict, after putting up the required infrastructure, being blessed with the right leadership and political stability, must be decorated with reforms that will add premium growth. Reform need to be done in all sectors, but if one wants to sequence them due to management limitations, I would prioritize education and administrative reforms as key priorities in our reforms. Reform cannot be done through mere procedural or circular changes or IT system in place of manual processes on existing non-functional institutions. Reforms neither can be done through granting extra allowances to motivate employees. It is possible only by entering into a new way of life in our administration. Reforms will not happen unless the top layer of bureaucracy and technocrats understand the need and commit themselves to make it happen. They must take the ownership. Political will alone is not sufficient. Reform must be driven from within and not from outside. So our ministers, the secretaries who are constitutionally responsible to manage ministries must spearhead this task, and they must also be made accountable. I hope Sri Lanka will enter into such a reform phase soon, considering the steps that the government has already taken by setting up a new Ministry for Public Management and Reforms and appointing the Cabinet Subcommittee to reform the investment climate, and also considering the constitutional reform agenda that the government has given priority. Ladies and gentlemen, when extending the formal invitation for this occasion, Dr. Udita Liyanage has mentioned in his letter that all participants have benefited in the course of learning and will be in a good position to discharge their official functions more effectively and efficiently. So I am looking forward for greater contribution from all of you, both in the Ministry of Finance and Planning and in the Provincial Council in the North and East. I am also considering to avail a similar opportunity to another batch of officials from the Ministry of Economic Development, of which I am the Secretary, to continue with this human resource development drive we have ventured to become. We consider this as equally important when we consider reforms in administration. Let me now conclude my speech by quoting from a speech delivered by Steve Jobs, the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of Apple Computers at the Stanford University, USA. I quote, "Death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it, and that is as it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It is life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. Right now, the new is you, that is you. But the old to make way for the new. But someday, not too long from now, you will gradually become the old and be chased away." Sorry to be so dramatic. This is not me, he is telling. Steve Jobs is telling to his probably younger audience than the audience I have. So he is apologizing to be so dramatic, but it is quite true. Your time is limited. So don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinion drown out your own inner voice, heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. Unquote. Thank you all very much.
As the Vice Chancellor of the University, I congratulate all those who received postgraduate diplomas in the discipline of public administration, and I wish that you will be able to make a long-lasting contribution to an excel